Hello, and here is the Eason news. Children's buyer for Eason's is stressed because he's been asked to pick his top 5 books, and it's taking me a long time to get to this 5, but I think I'm there. If not, I may have +1 because I can't commit completely. Where do you start? Favourite books I've read of all time, children's books? I have to start with Harry Potter. Why Harry Potter? Not alone because of what it did for children's books, like it brought it to the masses. When I was growing up with wee lads, your options were minimalist, but what Harry did was introduce a whole new world of kids. There was midnight openings, there was movies, there was fancy dress. It was the most amazing thing. Of the books in the series, Azkaban to this day is still my favourite book. I thought from 4 on, while there were great parts, I think they started to dip. Azkaban, I think, is the perfect Harry Potter book, and funny enough, the movie is also the most perfect movie of them all. So Harry Potter, absolute no-brainer. That's one of them. These are in no order, by the way. I wouldn't like to be prejudiced. Next up is Roald Dahl. When I was growing up, obviously you have to have a Roald Dahl in your top 5. The question is which one. You can name them all. I personally am going to go with James and the Giant Peach. Why James and the Giant Peach? Because A, it's as mad as most of his books. His characters, maybe it's because it's set in this, again, crazy world with these lunatic insects and all sorts. And the whole concept of flying around in the Giant Peach, just as I remember growing up as a kid, amazed me, and I reread it. I don't know how many times. So while there's 1,000,001 Roald Dahl books to choose from, I'm definitely going to go with James and Giant Peach because I absolutely love it, and it's one that you can kind of drift back into years later and have a read. And so Roald Dahl, James and Giant Peach, number 2. Number 3, again, going back to my youth, has to be The Never-Ending Story. Now, if you don't know what The Never-Ending Story is, yes, it's a movie, but before the movie and before Lamal and his lovely hair and that wonderful song, there was a book by an author called Michael Ende. And again, around the time I would have been reading Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, I'm absolutely in this fantastic little kind of fantasy world. This book kind of came out of nowhere, and because I was so obsessed with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, that it was something so fresh and new. And well, the movies and all, it captured a lot of people. Most people probably have never read the book. It's just a fantastical, amazing book that, again, I over years you kind of go back and read and see has it lost its mojo. I don't think it has, and I'd highly recommend something. And obviously you can play the music while reading the book because it's a great song. But Michael Ende's Never-Ending Story. Obviously I'm mentioning Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit because they're just, absolute masses. But I'm going to focus on The Never-Ending Story as my next choice. 2 to go. It would be unlike me not to mention dystopia. I was beaten over the head and told not to mention dystopia at all because all I do is seem to talk about dystopian novels. However, you can't have a top 5 without at least one dystopian novel, and despite there being so many to talk about, I'm going to focus on one, and the obvious one for me, and probably for most people, is The Hunger Games, because you've got a lead female character, Katniss, who is just such an amazing character who leads a revolution, and you've got to believe she can do it to go with it, and you do. You've got this amazing character, President Snow, and this area, the capital, and the whole high concept idea of it. I was totally blown away. I think President Snow is just absolutely brilliant, in a bad way, but he's brilliant. So I love, and yes, of the 3 books, I'm not going to say it's my favourite, but I absolutely adored adored probably the wrong word, but I love number 3. I know people give out about number 3, but I actually think I'm one of those people who thinks number 3 is fantastic, because it all had to go one way, and the revolution and all that. So Hunger Games. Now, in that dystopian area, because again, it would be unlike me to kind of harp on, but I have to mention an honourable mention to Patrick Ness and his Chaos Walking trilogy. Again, dystopian, set in the future, or is it? Absolutely amazing. It's best, a literary Hunger Games, probably the wrong way to describe it, but it's just so beautifully written and absolutely mind-blowing. Like, it's just the use of imagery and the way they do the noise, which is something else. You just have to see it to believe it. So you've got to go with Patrick Ness, the Chaos Walking trilogy. Again, just the brutalities of war and young love, and it's just stunning. And one that, unfortunately, for some reason, people haven't picked up on, or I don't know why, is Carrie Ryan's Forest of Hands and Teeth, which is basically zombie dystopian apocalypse type stuff. Again, beautifully written, again, more literary stuff, but it's just one of those things that whenever I've handed it on to people, they've come back and absolutely loved it. But for some reason, it just hasn't broke out into the big bad world. So if you haven't read the Carrie Ryan Force the Hands Teeth series, you got to do it. It's fantastic. And then finally, number 5 is, I was jumping around, and I kind of went, well, it's actually pretty obvious. It's Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials trilogy. Again, this comes from an era, what I would call the original golden age of the modern era for children's writing. So when Harry was getting out, people bailing in, and people wanted to read more and more, and as they were getting older, they wanted to go into new worlds. Lyra and Oxford and that whole magical world that Philip Pullman introduces is absolutely just gobsmackingly gorgeous and stunning, and some amazing characters in there that you just have to be read to be believed. Again, around the same time, you had the John Stroud, Bartimaeus trilogy, and you had Garth Nix's Sabriel, which again, absolutely brilliant series. These were all in this kind of era that, like, there was just so many good books at the time, you didn't know what to be doing yourself. But of them all, like, definitely Philip Pullman just stands like above them all, towering. And just again, if you haven't read it, it has to be read to be believed. And that's where normally I would stop, but because it's me and I'm doing top 5 plus 1, I cannot talk about my favourite books unless I talk about John Green included. Obviously, he's very hot at the moment, all things John Green. I'm going to be slightly controversial and not pick Fault in Our Stars, because I personally think Will Grayson, the book he wrote with David Leviathan, is stunning. It's just again, I talk about works of art. I think it just bowled me over, the humour, the wit, and it's just something that I think all young adults at this moment, as they're reading all these real world kind of books, it's one that just captures growing up and situations, and it's very, very funny. And I'm with Phil Racing and all that, but yeah, that's John Green. So I'm going to sneak John Green in, even though I'm not sneaking him in because he's number 6, but in a non-order way. So that really is my top 5 plus 1, and I'll probably change my mind next week and give another top 6. But at the moment, that's what I'm going with. Favourite world / land / place I'd like to live in? Oh, well, I can't live in a giant peach, because that probably wouldn't make sense, although I wouldn't, again, plenty of food, and I do like peaches. I would have to say the Shire, because actually I think I'm currently living in the Shire. It feels like the Shire. There's all bungalows and everybody's small like me, so I don't have to imagine living somewhere, because I personally called it the Shire. So the Shire would be my favourite place to live in, which is where I am right now. What book is on my list to read next, or most looking forward to? I would have to say I have so many books to read. I'm going to go with end of May. I think I'm starting to rock back and forth with excitement. City of Heavenly Fire, which is the final part of the Mortal Instruments series from Cassie Clare. That deserves an OMG, big OMG. Very excited just to get to the end of where we're going and what's going to happen, and God knows what's going to happen. But yeah, Cassie Clare's City of Heavenly Fire.